Access to Nature podcast. Stories from the heart of Africa.
Good day, folks, and welcome to the Access to Nature podcast, where we delve a bit deeper into the stories of Africa. My name's Arthur, and I'll be your host. So let's dive in with some of the most famous stories in Africa, and those are the stories of the man-eaters. Now, what is a man-eater? By definition, a man-eater is not an animal that kills a human or eats a human. There has been plenty of cases where animals have scavenged on human remains and they don't turn into full-blown man-eaters. Man-eaters are animals that exhibit this as a behavioral trait, and they do it again and again and again. So animals that are known to become man-eaters are, off the top of my head is some sharks, wolves, crocodiles, the big cats, but in Africa, particularly lions. Now, lions are significant contributors when it comes to the amount of man-eaters around the world. Now, what drives these animals to become man-eaters? We have to delve into that, and there's a couple of theories that have been proposed, and the one that is known by most people is the blood preference theory, that somehow these animals develop a taste for human flesh. Well, the reality is most predators are opportunistic, and they will eat whatever comes their way, and they don't really have a preference for eating one specific food. So I really don't think that theory holds much water. What I think happens, and studies have shown this to be a more likely case, is that because of environmental stresses, animals get to a point where they have there's a lack of prey in the area. We'll delve into that with some of the stories. And these animals become desperate. One animal has an injury and it's struggling to keep up with antelope, and it becomes really desperate. Now, in general, most animals, except for that I know of, crocodiles, have got a built-in fear of humans. And these animals will avoid human contact as far as possible. But when an animal gets desperate to the point where he says, well, I haven't eaten for 5 days, I see this human walking down here and I'm going to have a go. And what happens is there's a shift in the mentality. Because all of a sudden they realize, hey, hang on. These two-legged things walking around here that I've been scared of my whole life, they're not fast, they don't have teeth, they don't have claws, and they're not really good at fighting back. So we become easy food. And I think because the law of nature is you want to spend as little energy as possible and be rewarded with as much energy as possible after a meal. So at the end of the day, the fact that they lose their fear and start seeing us as prey is, in my opinion, the main driving factor that causes these animals to become man-eaters. But that being said, let's delve into a couple of the lesser and more known stories. So I'm going to start off with a very interesting case, because normally when we say man-eating lions, the first thing that jumps to mind is the man-eaters of Tsavo, that was made famous by the movie The Ghost in the Darkness. But coincidentally, that was not the worst case of man-eating lions in Africa. And the worst that I've come across is a pride that was called the man-eaters of Njombe. Now, I just love that name, Njombe. And this was a notorious pride of lions. The pride consisted of roughly 15 lions, so very close to super pride size. And they were active from 1932 until 1947. So throughout about the same years as the Second World War. Now, one of the things that led up to this is Tanzania, southern Tanzania at this point in time, where Njombe is located, is a British protectorate. So with the effects of colonialism, obviously there were people that settled there, they had cattle, the locals had cattle, and there was a rinderpest outbreak. Now, rinderpest can cause havoc among cattle, and it is transmitted by all hooved animals. So what happened was the British went out and they started shooting and culling wildlife. Now, from an economical point of view, to protect the cattle, that makes 100% sense with the knowledge at the time. Note, we wouldn't do something like that today, but with the knowledge at the time, we can see why they did this. But this has consequences. So your zebra, wildebeest, kudu, all those animals, the numbers tank. And when they tank, you have a problem because there's still predators out there looking for food. And that puts these predators into a situation where they become desperate. And in this case, what's really scary is it's the entire pride that started hunting humans. And if you look at the time span, it's literally a case where the adults were teaching the new cubs how to hunt humans, which is just mind-blowing. So with this happening, the pride actually changed their behavior to the point where lions generally during the day are very lazy animals. They'll spend most of the day lying under a tree sleeping unless the opportunity presents itself to go for a hunt. But in general, most of their hunting takes place dusk and dawn and through the night, because they have the advantage because of the vision. So what these lions would do is, because the hunts became so easy, they would attack a village and they might take 2 or 3 people. And it got to the point where they were actually thought to be doing like a relay system, where some animals would go into the village, grab the person, drag them out, and when they get to the edge of the village, the next one would grab it and carry on moving. And so they would drag the people out of the village and then consume them right there. And then instead of leaving, they would spend the whole night sleeping. After eating, they would sleep there close to that village. Now, there has been reports that they've hit village 2 or 3 nights in a row. But in general, what they would do, and this is where their behavior changed, is come sunrise, they get up and they start moving. And they move to the next village. And it might take a day or 2 to get there, but lions typically don't eat every day. And then they hit the next village. And this carried on for, well, almost 15 years. And throughout this time, the people didn't know how to react, because now you have all the superstitions and all of that, which is actually quite fascinating, that plays into it. But the people didn't really do anything about the lions. And eventually it was a British game ranger or a game warden that came in, realized what was going on, realized people taking advantage of the situation, and it took him almost 2 years to hunt the entire pride. Now here's the scary thing. These animals are thought to be responsible for the death of about 1,500 humans. Some estimates are even higher. So yeah, it's a super case. It's very interesting. So the plan for this series is, in this episode, we're quickly gonna talk about man-eaters in general, and then I'm thinking of doing some more episodes going more in depth on each one, on these cases in particular. You guys can pop a comment in and let me know if that would be something that you'd be interested in. So moving on, then comes the famous man-eaters of Tsavo. The Tsavo lions, made famous by Ghost in the Darkness, Val Kilmer hunting lions in Africa. So they are notorious. What makes this interesting is these lions were a bit different than most, in the fact that it was only two of them, two males, and they were maneless. Now, there's debates going on about what causes these males to be maneless. It has happened before. I'm sure there's currently a couple of maneless males running around the Tsavo area. And the leading theory is that it's because they're on the equator, it's very hot. That mane does not help with temperature regulation. So that's the leading cause. There is another theory that personally I've never seen a pride with a maneless male in charge. The maneless males always seem to be the weaker ones. So I buy more into the theory that it's a lack of testosterone. So they're not as strong as the other males. They don't have the main crucial protection when it comes to a lion fight, protecting the throat and the neck from bites. So they don't really have the advantage when it comes to a fight. They can't take over a pride. If they can't take over a pride, they don't have the cooperation of the females for hunting. And it's just a tough life. And the fact that there were two of them means they were probably brothers who who lived as a coalition. If the maneless thing is genetic, then that would make sense, because that's why these two lions both were maneless in this coalition. Now, these lions, this whole thing played down in 1898, and this is while they were trying to build the railroad and a bridge crossing the Tsavo River, and these lions were blamed for the death of around 140 railroad workers. Now, here is a interesting dynamic at play, because there's nothing in the area that led to a decline of wildlife. So this is the case that is used mostly for the bloodlust theory, because the theory is that this was very rough conditions, and the railroad workers were treated very badly, and there were diseases like malaria and things like that. So a lot of these workers died, and they weren't buried properly. So it's believed that these lions started off by scavenging on the corpses of dead railroad workers, and then decided, well, we can't wait for them to die, so we'll go and kill a couple. Now, imagine this, 140 people over a space of 2 or 3 months. You're lying in bed at night and you can hear the roars and the screams, and you know one of your colleagues has just been dragged out of his tent and he's about to become a lion's lunch. It's got to be a harrowing experience. Now, there is a famous book about this. If you're interested, it's called The Man-Eaters of Tsavo. Spoiler alert, it's a little bit disappointing because only about 2 chapters in the book is about the lions. The rest is Patterson, the chief engineer, that is talking about his hunting exploits in Africa. So it is a bit of a disappointment if you think the entire book is about the man-eaters of Tsavo. Now, these 2 lions were eventually hunted by Patterson. But here's the interesting thing. So with looking at it from a modern point of view, the 2 lions were actually taxidermied, and they ended up in the Field Museum in Chicago. And later on, they were returned to Kenya. And so we still have access to these lions. And with modern science, what they did is they looked at the hair growth isotopes on these lions, and they figured out that these lions maybe did not eat as many people as we think. So it turns out that one of the lions is thought to have consumed about 30 humans, and the other one is thought to have consumed about 40 or 50. But in any case, way less than the stories that were told. But like I said, it must have been a harrowing experience. It's a natural tendency for humans to overstate how bad these things are. But it is an interesting case, and there's a lot more information that we can delve into at a future date. Now, the next lion, it's kind of wrong of me considering he's a man-eater, but I do love his name. He was given the nickname Jingy Charlie, and very interesting where this nickname comes from. So the Jingy Charlie refers to White Charlie, and he was a white lion, but not a true white lion in the sense that with the genetic abnormality, but he was very light in color. Now here comes another thing. So once again, we know that the black maned lions, the more testosterone the animal has, the blacker the mane. So if this lion was very light, we could once again assume that he had a low testosterone count, which might explain why he did what he did. And he also had another unique thing about him, is he only had half a tail. So somewhere he must have gotten into a scrap and lost half his tail. So this also happened in Zambia. It was then called Northern Rhodesia, and it was around 1909. He also eventually teamed up with two other lions, forming this coalition, and they literally preyed on people moving between villages. Now, one of the things that made him famous is that he allegedly was one of the lions who killed about 4 of the people who went after him to hunt him. He was only active for a year. He evaded capture and evaded being hunted for about a year. But this coalition was responsible for the deaths of about 90 people before being shot. So a bit of a smaller case, but also very interesting. Now, in more modern times, there's actually a National Geographic documentary about this specific lion. And this specific lion is called Usama. No, not Bin Laden, just Usama. And where the name comes from is Usama literally means lion in Arabic. Now, he's in Rufiji in Tanzania. He was active. And this area is a lot of Arabic speaking people, hence the name. So now this leads me to come back to this, the desperation theory and the fact that humans are easy prey, because he killed just over 50 people, and it's the most recent of the lions that we have on this list. He was active from 2002 to 2004, which is very recent. He was eventually taken down by an American hunter who came in to help and took him down. But here's the interesting thing: when he was shot, he was only 3.5 years old. So once again, we have a lion that does not have the backup of a pride, because at 3.5 years old, just before the attack started, he was chased out of the pride, and he started his nomadic years where he had to bulk up and before taking over a pride, and he became desperate. He was struggling to hunt. Most male lions don't survive the nomadic years, and he made a plan. He adapted and he started hunting people. Now, like I said, he killed over 50 people in Rufiji, so definitely repeated behavior. There is stories about a female a couple of years earlier that was a man-eater, and it is possible that Usama was her cub, that she literally taught him to hunt humans. Can we prove it? Not really. On the other hand, when he was killed, they did find that he had a massive abscess on one of his molar teeth. Now, one of the articles I read said that's why he must have preferred human flesh because it's tender. Well, I don't think that's got anything to do with it. But if you think about it, how much bite force do you need to suffocate a kudu or an impala or a buffalo for that matter? You need quite a bite, and if you've got an abscess, that's not going to work. Us humans, on the other hand, we're not fast, we don't fight back, and we are kind of fragile. If he gave a half decent bite on the throat, he wouldn't even have to hold the pressure, and the job would be done. So I really think that the abscess was the biggest cause in him becoming a manhunter. And the last one on the list for today is the Lion of Mufue. And he was in the Luanga River Valley, also in Zambia, roughly 1991. Now, he killed an estimated 6 people. So once again, repeated behavior. But Luangwa Valley being a tourist attraction, being very well visited by people, you can't have a man-eater running around there and somebody's going to notice. So actions were quite swift to get this guy under control. And it is said that this lion became so fearless that at one stage he was playing with a laundry basket. And he picked up the laundry basket and in the middle of the day walked straight through the center of town with all the people there. And that goes to show he lost his fear of humans. He did not see humans as a threat anymore. Probably the biggest giveaway that this animal is dangerous. Now, the other stats I could find about him is, turns out he is in the Field Museum in Chicago. He's still there. So if you are in the States, in Chicago, and you want to go have a look, you know where to go look. He is estimated 10 feet long. So if I break that down, that's about 3 meters. 3 point something meters. That is a massive lion. Yeah, I don't want to run into that guy in an alley at night, or even in the bush at night. It's not going to be fun. So that's a quick roundup of the most famous stories of man-eating lions in Africa. So as I said, let us know. I'll dive into it and do a deep dive on these stories. But what's the conclusion here? So what causes these attacks? It's one of the things that have eluded conservationist solutions for a long time, and that is simply human-animal conflict. Humans are encroaching daily on wild areas in Africa. When humans go in there, they tend to live off the land, a reduction in prey. It doesn't reduce the number of predators. They still need to find food, and out of desperation, they turn to the next best thing, and all of a sudden, we're not on the top of the food chain anymore. But the biggest lesson here is we need to invest time and energy into studying how can we reduce human-animal conflict. And it's not just lions, it's not just predators. Human-animal conflict is a bigger problem in more ways than one. Well, folks, that's my story for the day. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it interesting. Hope you learned something. And look out for the next episode where we'll be probably doing a deep dive into the man-eaters of Njombe.